Assalamu alaikum. This is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our top story tonight is the U.S. Supreme Court upholds Obamacare. The Supreme Court preserved the landmark law against the latest Republican challenge. In a 7-2 decision, the court ruled Republican states did not have the right to sue. It is the third major challenge to Obamacare which has failed in the Supreme Court. The lawsuit was led by state of Texas, supported by 18 Republican-run states. Justice Alito was not pleased with the majority. He wrote, "No one can fail to be impressed by the lengths to which this court has been willing to go to defend the ACA against all threats." And former President Obama was happy about that. He tweeted, "Affordable Care Act is here to stay." In another case, the Supreme Court sides with Catholic foster agencies that exclude same-sex couples in a 9-0 ruling. Canada is seeing a rise in anti-Muslim incidents. Over a week after 4 Muslims were killed in a hate-fueled terror attack. Farid Amin is the chair of the board of directors at the Islamic Institute of Toronto in Scarborough. He says a man and a woman recently threatened to detonate a bomb and shoot people while trying to enter the mosque. They found both doors locked. The mosque staff called Toronto police, leading to the immediate arrest of the couple. And in Edmonton, police are investigating 3 incidents of hate vandalism, including one at a place of worship. Baitul Hadi had a swastika spray painted on the building. According to the police, 2 other incidents were reported in April in the same neighborhood. The Southern Baptist Convention elected Ed Litton as their president. Litton has worked to bridge racial divides in the church. The newly elected pastor from Alabama won 52% of the vote. He defeated Mike Stone, who was backed by a new group, the Conservative Baptist Network. His supporters are attempting to move the already conservative denomination further right. Litton was praised for his commitment to racial reconciliation and dealing compassionately with the issue of sexual abuse within Southern Baptist churches. The Southern Baptist Convention is the largest Protestant denomination in the United States. The International Criminal Court appointed British Muslim barrister Karim Khan its top prosecutor on Wednesday. Khan pledged to improve the court's track record by taking its strongest cases to trial. He's the third person to hold this position ever. Khan faces many challenges at a time of fierce political pressure on the world's permanent war crimes tribunal. The International Criminal Court is handling a number of sensitive cases, including the occupied Palestine territory case and the one on Afghanistan. The court is also investigating crimes against the Rohingya people of Burma. The Trump administration had imposed sanctions on members of the prosecutor's office. This was to pressure them not to pursue the Palestinian and Afghanistan cases. The sanctions have been dropped, but U.S. and Israeli opposition to the court remains. The Indian government is in a battle with U.S. tech firms, again, over a new set of online speech rules issued by Delhi. The rules require restrictions on topics of conversation. The Indian government also requires social media companies to comply with blackout orders and wants companies to identify the original sources of information. Failure to do so could result in criminal charges being filed against the employees of the companies. Samir Jain of the Center of Democracy and Technology, a digital rights advocacy group, says the future of free speech in the world's largest democracy is increasingly under threat. Twitter is putting up a fight with these rules and requested a 3-month extension. The rules went into effect on May the 25th. On 24th of May, Indian police entered Twitter's offices to deliver a notice and searched its premises. In a tweet, the company said it was concerned for its employees in India and the threat to freedom of expression. The Indian Constitution protects freedom of speech. India is amongst the top nations in the world seeking to restrict online speech. For the first half of the year, it was one of the top 5 countries asking Twitter to remove content. After the farmers' protests earlier this year, Twitter was asked to block 500 accounts of journalists, activists, and opposition leaders. Several Indian journalists face charges of sedition over reporting on their online posts, particularly about the government's mismanagement of the coronavirus crisis. India, the second largest country in the world, is rated at 142 in terms of media freedom by Reporters Without Borders. The Chinese Foreign Ministry rejects the establishment of the People's Tribunal on Chinese crimes against Uyghur people. Human rights activists and Uyghur experts have welcomed a People's Tribunal. The 9-member panel, predominantly lawyers and academics, make up the tribunal. It is chaired by prominent lawyer Sir Geoffrey Nice. The tribunal held its first set of hearings in the Uyghur Tribunal June 4th to 7th to investigate allegations of China's mistreatment of the Uyghurs in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan, known as Xinjiang. China, which has denied mistreating Uyghurs, scoffed at the panel. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhou Lijiang called the tribunal an orchestrated show. He accused it of being funded by East Turkestan separatists. China accused the World Uyghur Congress of being the main financial contributor. In April, British lawmakers unanimously declared the Uyghur crackdown a genocide. The United States, Canada, Netherlands, and Lithuania have already declared it to be genocide. China says the witnesses brought forward at the tribunal were just actors. The next session of the tribunal is scheduled from the 10th to the 13th of September 2021 in London. Algeria's National Liberation Front won the parliamentary elections held over the weekend, but with a significantly reduced number of seats. Of the 407 seats in parliament, it won 105. This is significantly less than the required 204 seats to secure a majority. Independent candidates were the second largest winning bloc with 78 seats. The Islamist Movement of Society for Peace won 64 seats. Those elections had the country's lowest ever turnout at 23%. Pop a pill and whiten your teeth? Well, in science news, researchers at the University of Washington are developing a breath mint that rebuilds enamel while whitening your teeth. The team, headed by Professor Mehmet Sarikaya, is preparing for clinical trials of the lozenge. The lozenge contains genetically engineered peptides along with phosphorus and calcium ions, which are building blocks of tooth enamel. It is designed to deposit several micrometers of new enamel on teeth while not affecting the mouth's soft tissue. 2 lozenges a day can rebuild enamel, while 1 a day is sufficient to maintain a healthy layer. The team is also researching several other commercial products and applications that would fill the existing cavity in true regenerative oral health care. Life and death can be just a moment away. One moment full of life, another moment lifeless. This man thought he would die when a humpback whale swallowed him up. But a moment later, the whale spit him back to life. The rest of the story in this report by Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk.
We knew this through the prophet Jonah story, that there is life after being inside a whale. The prophet Jonah is the only one in known history to do so. Prophet Jonah is Prophet Yunus for Muslims. Well, that was until this news. Michael Packard is a 56-year-old from Massachusetts with a story to tell. Michael is a lobster diver. He was diving 45 feet down the water off of Cape Cod. Suddenly, he found himself in a humpback whale's mouth. In the beginning, Michael feared he'd been attacked by a shark. He then felt around him in darkness and realized that there were no teeth. That is when Michael realized that he was in a whale's mouth. Luckily, Packard was still wearing his scuba gear and breathing apparatus inside the whale's mouth.
Well, when I dive for lobsters, my mate he follows my bubbles. And so he was right next to me, and he saw the whale come up and throw me out, and he pulled right over, and then another boat helped carry me and pulled me into the boat.
After about half a minute, the whale rose to the water's surface. It began shaking its head from side to side and threw him out. Packard feared that he wouldn't make it out alive, thinking of his wife and sons. But then the whale had spat him out. Packard was pulled out of the water by his crewmen. He was rushed back to Cape Cod Hospital. He later wrote on Facebook, "I'm very bruised up, but have no broken bones. Packard says he'll be back in the water as soon as he heals." Packard had lived. It was not his time to leave this world.
Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Indian farmers have been protesting for 200 days. Welcome back. Thousands of Indian farmers, mostly from the state of Punjab in India, began their protest in November last year with the demands to repeal laws that affected their livelihood. The demonstrations also received support from social activists, some political parties, as well as locals in the capital of Delhi. The protests against controversial farm laws continue as they mark 200 days. To learn more about their ongoing struggle, let's go to Amina Ahmed, who's with an advocate and activist from Delhi, Govind Bali. Over to you, Amina.
Thank you, Hena. And now on the topic of farmers' protest, we have with us Govind Bali, who is an advocate and lawyer from India. Thank you so much, Govind, for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Now, Govind, with 200 days of these farmers' protests going on, what are the recent updates that we are seeing, in the last 6 months, more than 6 months? How has these protests shifted in terms of their purpose or in terms of the response that they have been getting from the Indian government?
It is at a stalemate, to be honest. The number of protesters has not reduced, it's gone up. The response from the government, there are no communications as such that are happening right now, but the protests are going on in a very good manner and in a peaceful manner. And the objectives remain the same, that these laws should actually be repealed and farmer-friendly laws should come in.
So as someone who has been on the ground for these last 6 months, how has these protests looked like, as a lawyer who has also been fighting for the bail of many farmers? What has your experience been like?
Experience is very simple. We've been able to get bail for most of the farmers, and I've seen the actual India in these protests, because the idea of secularism, the idea of unity, everything is out there. You see someone wearing a skull cap, someone wearing a turban, someone wearing a cross, someone in a saffron kurta pajama, all of them sitting there and working together. You see the Nihangs out there, you see the Pandits out there, you see the Maulvis out there. So it actually showcases the true colors of India. And these protests have been so self-reliant that people are cooking for themselves. They're feeding people who are coming to support the protest. So it actually shows that how self-reliant a farmer is.
With the second surge of COVID-19, there's also been calls to shut down these protests. What does the response of the farmers look like to these
The
calls?
farmers are very, very, very clear about it. The protest is not going to be shut down till the time the government does not take away the laws. Till the time the laws are not repealed, we will be on the roads. We'll be protesting for our rights, whether it is legally or it is through the idea of protest, which is a constitutional right given to us. COVID-19 second surge has affected the country really bad. We've lost a lot of people. But we should not forget that more than 500 people have died in the protest sites also. And there has been no statement on those deaths by the government. And we also need to take into consideration that the priorities might change, but the objective is same. That is a country where employment comes first, where education for all comes first, where food for all comes first, and where there is job for the youth.
Many have also blamed the surge of COVID-19 to these mass protests. What is your response to that?
No, that's not true.
Right.
These mass protests have actually been isolated to a certain area, and if you look at the statistics, the number of cases there have not been a large number of them. I should rather say that the government made some decisions which actually led to the surge. We had some ritual functions, we had some, uh, you know, Hindu rituals taking place. On the same hand, we had some yatras coming up, political rallies going on. These all collectively are responsible for the surge. Another big responsibility is on the citizens also, because citizens also became ignorant of the second wave. So it is not only the government that is at fault, it was the citizens itself who did not take care for being at fault for the surge of the COVID.
So, do you blame at all the Indian media for these portrayals of the farmers' protests?
I would not blame anyone as such. Everyone has been doing their job, but I would rather appreciate the local media, young media people coming out with their cameras, broadcasting live the actual situation on ground on Facebook, YouTube, other channels. And they have actually been more active than the mainstream media. And I congratulate them for showing that Indian media still has some spine.
What do the future of these protests look like to you as someone who has been on the ground in these protests, who has been heavily involved? How do you think these protests will go on?
I won't ascertain the future of the protest, but I certainly know these protests have given us a lot of confidence. It has brought in the youth, which were sitting at homes playing video games, to think about policy matters, to think about political scenarios, the democratic structure of the country. It has also given a new hope to people that they can be part of the policy making process and the political scenario at large. And in the end, these laws will be repealed, whether it is repealed within 6 months or 7 months, these laws will for sure be repealed.
Have many farmers been imprisoned because of their protesting, as a result of their protesting?
A large number of them certainly were arrested, but most of them are out on bails.
And was this at the beginning of the protest, or is this something that's been ongoing?
There was a certain period of time when arrests were taking place. The last case that I remember is from Tohana, where murder case, attempt to murder case under Section 307 of the Indian Penal Code was put on a farmer. And the whole farmers' protest shifted to that state, and the FIR was quashed. And the minister's PA who had put in, then the minister actually filed an affidavit that the case must be taken down. So the protests have been there, cases have been filed, but lawyers, activists, and people have been fighting for the rights of the farmers.
Do you believe that the Indian government had any idea of how large these protests would be and that they would go on for so long?
Nobody had the idea that this promise protest would go on for so long and it would become such a big protest. But then we should not forget that India has been an agrarian society, and we are because of the farmers. Indians have always been a farm oriented economy, and the farmers are they are strongly willed and they know how to take their rights. So it is good that the protests have gone long. It is one of the largest protests in the history, and I guess it would come to a positive end. And the best part is that most part of the protest has been peaceful.
All right, Govind. And from the international community, many of our viewers in America and Canada, do you believe that the momentum, the support, and attention from the international community has slowed down at all?
I don't think so. Personally speaking, the momentum has not gone down. Momentum is same. Yes, the coverage has gone down by the media, but the momentum has not shifted low. I still see people supporting the protest. There has been a lot of help from larger organizations, and the farmers are self reliant. They have been cooking for them and for the protesters also. They have been staying properly, they have been helping each other. They have a COVID hospital. They have a hospital there, not a COVID hospital. So I don't think so. The support has gone down or the momentum has gone down.
Earlier in the protest, we did see violence against those who were protesting. And has that violence from police continued against protesters?
I wouldn't call it violence from the police. I would rather call it uh, duty that they've been doing, to be very honest. Most of the people in the police and the army are sons of farmers and agriculture owners, agricultural workers from the state of Punjab, Haryana, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, name a state. Most of the people in the armed forces or the police forces are sons of farmers. But what needs to be taken into consideration is that there have been isolated incidences of violence, and we condemn that. We, at large, believe in a peaceful protest, which is our constitutional right, and we do not want any form of violence whatsoever.
All right, thank you, Govind Bali, for joining us, and I'll hand it back to you, Hena.
Thank you, Amina and Govind. Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Yesterday, we shared the details of the Biden-Putin meeting, which took place in Geneva, Switzerland. To talk about the takeaways of this meeting, Professor Nikolai Petro is joining Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid from Ukraine for a detailed conversation. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. President Biden gave a nice gift of his favorite Gladiator glasses, custom made to President Putin. We don't know much about what President Putin gave it to him. But that nicety ended when a reporter from CNN asked President Biden, what do you expect or when do you expect the behavior change in President Putin? He didn't like that at all. He got pretty upset. But was he getting what the world getting some truth out of President Biden when he was really upset? Well, we will discuss the great summit between President Putin and President Biden with a person who works for peace. Right now, he's in Ukraine researching for his new book. We have with us Nikolai Petro. Welcome to Muslim Network.
Thank you very much, Malik.
Professor Petro is a professor at the University of Rhode Island. So President Biden says, I did what I came here to do. What did he went there to do?
Well, taking him at his word, he came to start a new chapter in U.S.-Russian relations. And it seems to have gotten off to a surprisingly good start, at least much more so than was expected within the Washington establishment.
Do you think, what gives you that feeling that it started with in good way?
The best indication is the response and the positive response of his interlocutor, Vladimir Putin, who both yesterday and again today spoke very highly of President Biden. One word that hasn't come up much in the assessments of the meeting, but that I think we should be talking about is the chemistry that seems to have developed between them. They appear to actually respect each other. And I gather this from what President Putin said several times about Joe Biden, namely that he is a professional. And having read a lot of what President Putin has had to say, I could say that calling someone a professional is for him one of the highest compliments that he can give.
Well, why do you think so?
Why is it a compliment to call him a professional?
Yeah, from Putin.
Well,
because of his professionalism in KGB?
No, because by contrast with President Biden's predecessors, several of his predecessors, professionalism would be a relief, I think, in dealings with Washington. Less rhetoric, less ideologically motivated positioning, and more practical results. That seems to be, we're only judging this from a great distance and through intermediaries, but that seems to be what both sides now want to initiate in a structured fashion. And they're actually giving it a name. The new name of this approach is called strategic stability. And the strategic stability is going to be the task of appropriate professionals in a number of specific areas that have already been designated. So let's hope for the best and that their work proceeds.
Well, you're seeing great results, but this is what a CNN reporter asked President Biden, and he was extremely upset. He got angry to the level that he himself apologized later on because people were expecting something to come out, and they felt, and many media is commenting on this, that, after each American president meets, it starts off good, but it leads to nowhere.
Diplomacy has two ways of being measured. One is in the short term, and that is mostly a public relations aspect. In other words, who's up, who's down, who got the better of whom. That public relations function is the one that the press is the only one that the press is interested in. That's their bread and butter. It gives them the ratings they need to make money. But the deeper heart of diplomacy are the negotiations that take place over a long period of time, that are detailed negotiations among professionals that we never hear about until the treaty is signed. And I am hoping that what Biden has done, or is trying to do, is to shift the focus of the American bureaucracy away from the public relations aspect toward the more professional diplomacy, which has been so sorely lacking for more than a decade in US-Russian relations.
Biden and Putin both have agreed to start negotiations on arms control. Are you hopeful about that? I mean, there seems to be, not much progress in the last decade, as you mentioned.
It's been worse than that. It's been a retreat. And those who followed Putin's press conference can listen to the details of that retreat as he lists them. The withdrawal of the United States from arms control treaties that Putin said have actually destabilized the international environment. So we don't know how much how much restoration can be accomplished, and whether we can make any progress beyond what previous generations have achieved. But it is a hopeful sign that we are moving in the opposite direction, away from the abandonment of treaties toward an interest in negotiating and re-establishing treaties.
Professor Petrov, could you do some fact-checking for us? President Putin said in his press conference, of course, that majority of the cyber attacks actually originate from the United States. And in the top 5 countries, Russia is not even listed. Is he telling the truth today?
I don't know. I haven't had a chance to check that. Specifically with respect to the nations below the United States. But it stands to reason, and I believe I did read this somewhere, although I can't confirm it, but it certainly stands to reason that the country with the largest internet infrastructure and the largest economy would also have the largest number of hackers, both domestic and foreign. That is just common sense, it seems to me. If you look at the relative size of the internet communities that we're talking about among nation states.
President Biden and President Putin, I must correct myself, they agreed to have a talk on cyber attacks, and they agree there should be certain things off limits, like water and energy sector and things like that. Does it mean both admit that cyber attack will continue as long as certain things are kept off the list?
I didn't hear an agreement reached on those points. What I heard was President Biden saying that he had put forward a list of 16 unspecified infrastructure, forms of infrastructure that should be off limits. And President Putin responding, as he has for many years before this, with the suggestion that there should be a negotiated treaty regulating what should be off limits in cyber warfare. So that's where we are right now. We are merely talking about setting the agenda for what might actually be negotiated.
So you think in terms of setting agenda, both went along well. They said they went along well, and they said they, so you feel there is a chemistry between a professional KGB officer who has been in power for long and a professional politician who knows United States better than anybody else. These will be the professionals who will keep the rhetoric down and may be able to accomplish something. So that's where your hope resides, it seems. Am I correct?
My hope stems from the position that both of them have taken publicly, which boils down to the following. We need to move beyond looking at this relationship between our two countries as a zero-sum game. When I win, you lose. Because in fact, both of these countries are so interconnected with world affairs that when either one of them suffers, they both suffer and the entire world suffers. So rather than a zero-sum game, we need to begin to construct a type of relationship from which both sides, both parties can benefit for the sake of the entire, for the well-being and prosperity of the entire world. That's what I heard as a promise, as a pledge that both sides wanted to move toward.
Do you think there is some hope for people in Syria in all of this?
There should be better, so kindness and compassion has a way of spreading more beneficially, if not easily, than hate. So if we can begin to sense this compassion in others and believe and see them as human beings, even people that we, in the case of the United States and Russia, that I'm most familiar with, or Ukraine and Russia, where there's a lot of demonization going on, then perhaps some of that generosity of spirit can also be shared with the long-suffering people of Syria.
So, Professor Petros, since you are right now in Ukraine, thank you so much for joining us. Tell me how Ukraine media is talking about this particular, it being on the border of Russia and in conflict.
The Ukrainian media is very polarized. There is a media that is sanctioned by the state. In other words, it has the blessing of the current establishment, and it basically follows the line that the current Ukrainian government takes, which is that Russia is a permanent enemy, a perpetual enemy of Ukraine, and that Ukraine is at the forefront of Europe fighting to hold back this enemy from Europe's borders.
So this is sort of a Cold War language.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Sort of a Cold War language. They're at the forefront,
yes,
defending freedom, liberty, and the Western Europe.
Exaggerated to the extent of becoming a biblical language of heaven and earth and sort of like total incompatibility of values between good and evil. Unfortunately, much of Ukrainian rhetoric, even from official personalities, takes on that quality. Having said that, strangely, many of the most popular networks, several of which have been taken off the air, they've been deprived of their licenses by the official state regulators, they nevertheless are available on the internet. And many of Ukraine's most popular commentators take a more pragmatic view, that Ukraine is geographically where it is, and if it wishes to not just survive, but to prosper, it must work out a modus vivendi with Russia. The exact nature of that needs to be carefully negotiated, but it cannot rely for its own survival on demonizing Russia. So those are the two very different positions. They rarely meet together on a single stage. When they do, we often see fistfights occur, both in the parliament, as occurred this week, and on television. So that's the level of internal animosity that drives Ukrainian politics, sadly. And my work is primarily devoted to saying that if you don't learn to respect each other's differences, you will remain a house divided against itself, which, as Abraham Lincoln, biblically citing the Bible, famously said, cannot stand.
President Putin yesterday stated, there is no peace, there is no, I'm quoting him, there is no happiness in life. There is only a mirage on the horizon. So cherish that. What is Putin is not known for poetry, is he?
Well, in Russia, he is widely recognized as someone who enjoys citing the literary classics, or some literary classics. In this case, he was citing Tolstoy. And the phrase that he used twice to define the hope that he had for the relationship with the United States was that although, as he said, quoting Tolstoy, complete happiness may be a mirage, nevertheless, when it seems darkest and there's a summer lightning flash, suddenly the entire world becomes illuminated and we can see ways forward that we couldn't see before. And I think that's a very nice metaphor to take forward into this, and that we can hope for as a guiding imagery, as a guiding image for this relationship.
Professor Petro, the last question. How prepared do you think President Biden was for this summit?
I think he was well prepared. I might have given him some different readings. His reading of Russian history seems rather outdated to me. He did make reference to several things that he'd read. I find it far-fetched that he has read everything that Putin has actually said over 20 years, as he claimed. But I'm sure he got the highlights and the gist of it. And more than that, I get the sense, I may be wrong, that President Biden is someone who is very confident in his personal ability to judge people. So even if all of his advisors will have sort of one set of recommendations, if he feels differently about the person, he will go with his gut. Part of the expression of that is the kind of emotional reaction that he sometimes has to people challenging him. But that's because he has his own very clear compass, his own moral compass on these matters.
Well,
sometimes that works well for presidents, is all I can say.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Petro. I don't know what time it is in Ukraine, but I hope you're enjoying yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid and Dr. Petro. That's all from our Washington studio tonight. Thank you for tuning in to our show. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.